Hey, Takisha, welcome to the His and Her Money Show.
Hi, how are you?
Doing well. So glad to have you here on the show to help us think through money and the proper mindset that we should have around it. But before we start digging into your advice, can you just say hello to everyone that's tuned in right now and let them know what
Hey.
you're all about?
All right. I am Takisha Artis. I am a financial life coach. I help primarily women entrepreneurs develop a better relationship when it comes to money so that they can create the wealth experiences that they want. Because ultimately, that's what we all want. We all want money to support us. We make a lot of it. Now we need the proper mindset so that we can keep some of it to do the things that we love.
So, where do you see people getting their relationship with money wrong the most? Where are the errors most consistent in how we interact with money or how we think about our money?
So I think we get them from primarily our parents, right? Or our environment or the culture. And sometimes those thoughts, beliefs, attitudes are outdated. So if your parents, what applied to them doesn't necessarily apply to us, but we keep those same mindsets. So I think we hold on to a lot of borrowed beliefs. And until we can kind of become aware of why we do the things that we do, why we believe the things that we do about money, we'll always kind of keep repeating them. So it's becoming more aware of the things we say, the spending habits that we have, what we're doing with money. And I think once you become aware of it, you can start to challenge those beliefs. Like, why do I say that? People always say, well, I've always done it this way, but that doesn't mean that it's best serving you. So I think once we start to kind of understand that we have to start becoming aware of what we think and challenge it and kind of see if it still applies or if it's still true, we'll always kind of be doing things that may not really push us towards what we want. That's why a lot of strategies work. But then people say, well, I tried that. It didn't work for me. It may not have been the strategy, but the mindset.
That's what I was going to say. So, how do we determine that there is something bad maybe going on with our mindset? Because we may have attempted to get on a budget before, we may have attempted to save for a rainy day before, we may have attempted to invest in the stock market before, and it all just didn't work. It didn't have sustainability. And so people can become discouraged, like you said, around the strategies that they tried and nothing's sticking, and start to let a little bit of hopelessness set in. So how do we take these things that we tried and say, maybe it's something different, and that different being our mindset? And then how do we pull out the shovel and dig into what may be faulty in our thinking?
I think when you realize that the strategy didn't work, but you still want to do it. So before that hopelessness kind of kicks in, really determine what it is that you're trying to do. But I think people do things without understanding why. Why is this what you want to do? Why do you want to invest? Why do you want to save? And once you come up with that, what are the things that are stopping you? We all have this internal dialogue that says, you've tried it, don't try it again. But that internal dialogue, if that goes against why you're trying to do it, that's a good indicator that your mindset is off. So some of the things that you can do is that internal dialogue. What is it saying? Like, acknowledge it. It's saying like, okay, well, maybe I'm not smart enough to do that. Challenge it. Is that true? No, you are smart enough to do that. Is this are you worthy of being wealthy? Yes, that's very true. Like, we have to get to the doubts, the fears that are stopping us and acknowledge them and work on those. Those are the things that are stopping you from ultimately doing the strategy. So it's like you get the strategy, you say, I want to save. But then the next thing that comes up says, well, I don't have money to save. Is that ultimately true? No, it's not true. You do have the money to save. You just may have to readjust, your spending, or make saving a higher priority. Instead of making it the last thing you find money for, you make it the first thing you make money for. So it's coming up with those why nots, what ifs, why don't you want this, or it's that real internal dialogue. And once you figure out what the internal dialogue is saying, then you just disprove or deny all of those doubts. You kind of work through the fear. So, people say, well, I want to invest, but then in the next sentence, they say investing is hard. Well, is that ultimately true? No, it's not hard. You may not have found the right vehicle for you to use to invest, or maybe you haven't done enough research to start investing. So maybe going back to that drawing board, but a lot of the things that we want, we in the next thought kind of talk ourselves out of it. And that's what the problem is. We want it, but our doubts, fears, beliefs say that we can't have it, or maybe it's not for us, or maybe it's too hard, or, some type of negative thought that keeps us from actually doing it. So I think the easiest way to kind of challenge those things is to reframe. And it's a 4-step process. Is this true? If it's not true, what's the new belief that you want to have? We all have incredible minds that we can decide to do something different. So if you say saving is hard, well, is it ultimately hard? No, because you can put it on auto withdrawal and leave it. And then therefore, you don't even have to think about it again. And so if you say, well, is this true? And maybe the answer is yes. What's the new belief or thought that you want to have about it? You can decide to make it a positive thought, and then get some new experiences around it. If such and such is good at saving, you can too. Maybe you just need to build that confidence and letting it, being comfortable with wealth, being comfortable accumulating more than you have, because sometimes that's the problem. It's not that the strategy is wrong. Maybe it's the belief that you can't have what it is you're working towards.
So the first step you said is to reframe and
Mm-hmm.
to adjust the way we think about it. Instead of saying it one way, we twist it and say it another way. That can be easier said than done because of what you previously said. Our belief system around, you said it, am I worthy of wealth? So some people want to be wealthy, like I would love to be wealthy, but they may not feel worthy of being wealthy. How do we get there?
So it's coming up with, it's again changing the narrative. So if you feel like you aren't worthy, why not? And disprove those thoughts. Like, it could have been a parent that said something in your childhood and you just stuck to this, or someone could have, you could have saw something and you felt unworthy of it, and so it kind of sticks with us, but you go through the same process. Why do I feel unworthy? Is that ultimately true? A lot of us hold on to a lot of beliefs that we created in childhood that just no longer serve us. So I say, if you have a hard time with overcoming the am I worthy of it, are your children worthy of it? And then most parents ultimately, like, yes, they are. And so then you say, what are some new experiences that I can have so that I can create this feeling of worthiness, not maybe not for me, but for them? Or, and then again, you do the same thing. It's, if I'm not worthy of it, why not? If I am, if I do believe that I'm worthy of it, what's ultimately stopping me from doing this? And then you create the experiences. Find someone who's done it. Find an example. Find that model who's done ultimately what it is that you're trying to do. A lot of us haven't had examples of wealth, and so we don't really know what that looks like. But society has said that wealth is a mansion and a Maserati and a yacht in the back. But ultimately, that may not be your version of wealth. Maybe your version is money in the bank account and being comfortable making your own financial decisions. Or maybe wealth is having a nice house and a nice car and being comfortable with, money in the bank. So everyone has to kind of identify their own value of wealth and their own value of their worth. No one outside of you can tell you what you're worth except you. It's an internal It's an internal thing. Like, you can decide, no matter what anyone else said, you decide what that worth value is, what that deserve level is.
So is there like a exercise should we be writing these thoughts out and trying to organize our definitions of what wealth is and finding the ability to be worthy of it?
Yeah, so I think if you want to do a wealth exercise, I think the first thing is just kind of figuring out, what does wealth look like to you a year from now? And I know sometimes we get in the middle of focusing on where we are right now. So it's hard to say, okay, a year from now, this is where I want to be. We're like this, I'm struggling right now. I can't even think about tomorrow. But that's part of the problem, is that you aren't thinking about tomorrow. You are in survival mode today. But to get out of that, you have to kind of take yourself out for a second and think long term. And a year isn't, that far away, but you have to get out of where you are today. And so what does wealth look like? Maybe wealth a year from now could be, your bills paid off or caught up, just not today. Does that make sense? Like, and I think people look too far ahead, and that makes them discouraged. So look a year from now. If you got 50,000 extra dollars, what would that do for your family? Or if you paid off your debt, what would that do for your family? And then go to the next milestone. But don't shoot all the way to the top, because then you'll get discouraged on your climb. So what's the next level? And then once you get there, what's the next level after that? But don't just shoot so high that you get discouraged. Another exercise that you can do is write out your money story. And so that's just what you believe about money. Do you think money is a good thing? Do you think money is a bad thing? Do you think money is something that you can have? And then think about it in different categories. What do you believe about money in terms of saving, investing, making money, managing money, creating money? And kind of see, I had issues with receiving money, but I was very good at saving and investing. But my flaw, or my block, was receiving. And so as an entrepreneur, I would find myself doing the same things over and over when I would get money. And I started to notice a pattern. And that pattern started to make me say, every time I do this, I kind of fall back. And so I started to examine what those patterns were and where I got them from. And I realized it was a childhood thing. So, where are you on your money story? What are your beliefs, your attitudes? How do you feel about spending? When you get money, how does it make you feel? Do you get uncomfortable where you feel like you just need to go out? When you save money, do you get to a certain dollar amount and then that bill comes up because you're uncomfortable with holding on or having abundance? I find women sometimes have a hard time with that. We want it, but when we get it, we're very uncomfortable with the idea of having more than enough that we're used to. So really identifying, like, how much money are you comfortable even making? And really look at that. Sometimes we don't know that, we can get that raise, or maybe you have to go to another job to get that increase. So really, what's your money story, and kind of go through different areas of it, to really examine what your beliefs are, what your attitudes are, what your behaviors are. And that kind of will tell you, like, okay, maybe my block isn't saving. Maybe my block is having more than. Maybe I'm not comfortable asking for a raise because I don't feel qualified for it. Or maybe I don't feel comfortable having money because I feel like there's so many other people without it. So we all have these blocks, and until we kind of write out our money story, we don't really know what they are. We just assume that the strategy didn't work, but it's not the strategy, it's really the story we're telling ourselves about money. And that's really what money mindset is. It's the stories, the beliefs, the thoughts, the patterns, the behaviors, and the habits that we have around money that stop us ultimately from doing the things that we want to do with money. Money is just a tool. So if this tool is just something to help you buy things or invest in something or save in something or create these wealth experiences, what do you want to do with it and how do you feel with it?
And now, a word from our sponsors. What do you want for your family? It's time to make a decision. Taking care of your financial well-being while building trust with your spouse doesn't have to be tough, and learning how to do it won't cost you a fortune. Tala and Ty McNeely, the creators of His and Her Money, present to you Power Couples University. Imagine if you reduce financial stress and take control of your life. Come be equipped with the tools for money management, wealth building, relationship wellness, and entrepreneurship. Get access to online courses, live Q&A sessions with Tala and Ty McNeely, a private accountability group, and expert masterclass sessions from the world's smartest money and entrepreneurship experts. Don't wait. It's time to make a decision. Power Couples University. Visit powercouplesuniversity.com for more details. And now, back to the show.
Now, can you talk a little bit more about your story and how you connected the dots to that one aspect? Because some people are going to take notes right now and they say, okay, I need to write out my money story. But you went on a journey. You realized that you had a block that traced back to your childhood. But how did you connect those dots? Can you talk through the journey so for the person listening, they'll know as they start to walk down their journey backwards, how to connect those dots? And then what did you do to change what you found?
So I think the first story that I really need to talk about is that I come from a family where money wasn't talked about. I am first generation college student. And so when I went to college, the first week on campus, there was a company and I got a credit card. I didn't know how credit cards worked. I didn't really know what a credit card was. I had no job. I don't even know if I had credit. But they allowed me to get this credit card and I didn't know I had to pay it back. I didn't know that there was such a high interest rate. I knew nothing. And so I went on to get this accounting degree, but nowhere in my studies was I offered a personal finance class. So I'm trained to manage millions, but I couldn't manage my thousands. And so I want people to understand that we aren't taught this in school. And the things that we are taught come from our parents, and based on their knowledge of money and their experiences and their story, they then tell us that and they give us their perspective. And so I found myself a single mom with this new baby, and I was like, I am struggling. Like, I have this good salary, but I don't know how to manage it between student loans and daycare. I didn't know what to do. And so I filed for bankruptcy, and I had a lot of shame and embarrassment about, this new money story. And I had to realize that this was my fresh start. And that bankruptcy was just a tool that I was going to use for this fresh start, and nothing more, nothing less. And so I decided, like, I know how to do a budget. I know these things, but why can I not do it? And so I said, okay, God, like, give me this new mindset, this new strategy, whatever it is that I need. And I just started to think differently about money. I started to say, what's my why? Why am I doing this? And that kind of led to me on this kind of financial journey. And when I started to notice the patterns in my business of receiving, I did the same thing every time it happened. And I just noticed, like, every time I get a sale or do a big launch, I kind of do what I need to do for it, but I back up and disappear, not from social media, because I was uncomfortable with that money for whatever reason. And I'm like, I literally got out my journal and why is this so uncomfortable for me? Why do I show up, ask for money, be uncomfortable with asking for the sale? Why am I uncomfortable with those things? And in doing journaling, you know how, like, people say, like, the answer is in you, it's just deep down. And I would say, like, I don't think I'm good at sales. I don't think that I'm qualified to do this. I don't think that this is, I should be charging for it. And then I would say, well, why don't I feel that way? Why do I feel this way? And in those questions, it was like, one of the reasons that I feel so uncomfortable with receiving is because when I was a child and my grandmother, so one of the things that she would say when we would go to someone's house is, don't ask for anything. And I would be like, well, what if I wanted it? But that got me out of being comfortable with receiving compliments, And so it was through that journaling and asking, why do I feel this way? Why do I think this way? Where did that come up? And that was my story. I got it from childhood, and it just lingered in the back with me. And so sometimes I tell my clients, your story doesn't have to make sense to your adult mind because you probably got it as a child. My grandmother didn't mean anything by that, but in that time, it was probably a don't ask for anything because they may not have enough. And so that I didn't understand that as a 7, 8-year-old. I was just like, okay, well, asking for stuff or receiving stuff, I probably shouldn't do it. And so it just stuck with me in the back of my head. And it's not until you are an adult and you challenge, why do I believe this? Where did that come from? That the answer will just pop in your head. And you'll be like, well, that doesn't even make sense. It doesn't need to. A lot of our beliefs don't make sense because they were just told to us and we take them as fact. I give the analogy all the time. When we're children, the stove is hot to us, right? And so you do get those kids who will say, okay, yeah, she said it was hot, I'm gonna touch it anyway. And you realize what she said was true. But if you go past the stove later and you touch it and it's not hot, you're like, I thought she said the stove was hot. But then as adults, we realize that yes, the stove is still hot, but I can do different things with it. I can make cookies, cakes, and pies. I can make great meals and have, feed my family, but the stove is still hot. So that perception that the stove is still hot is still true, but does it serve you now? No. If I didn't touch the stove, I ultimately wouldn't be able to, cook for my family or, provide this environment where we're having Sunday dinners and it's all about family. So yes, it's still true, but you have to flip your perspective on it. And I think that sometimes we still are like, the stove is still hot, I am not touching that thing. Instead of saying, okay, well, is this still serving me? Is this still true? Yes, it's true. But what's the new narrative? The new narrative is I, as an adult, can handle this. Even though it's still hot, I am prepared to work the eyes because I have a little bit more experience, more knowledge.
How difficult was it for you once you understood where the breakdown happened to reframing and rethinking and developing a new mindset that allowed you to now be able to receive?
It's a daily thing. It's not like you like, oh, okay, I'm telling myself this new story and now you just believe it. No, I think money mindset is an ongoing thing, just like wealth creation and money management is. It's ongoing. And so you have to work at it daily. Once I kind of understood the story, because now you have awareness on it, I was able to work through it quicker. And so I would say, okay, well, when I'm uncomfortable with it, I would say, okay, this is a result of this. And so is this true? And I would do that reframing again. Is this true? If it's not true, what's the new narrative? Okay, can I get some experience behind it? Like I used to tell myself all the time, like, you can't sell, you're terrible at selling. And finally I was like, if you sell one thing, you can sell. And then it was like, oh, okay, well, that kind of makes sense. Then it was, I'm not good at selling. And then it was like, okay, I heard selling is just a conversation of what you offer. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. I could do that. And so I still had to kind of work through that every time I do a big launch. And it's like, literally back to that journal. What's what pops up, because the negative inner dialogue will say, well, that was a one-time thing. You're not good at it anymore. And it's like, well, I was good at it last time, so let me go through the process again. Or a new thought will be like, well, last time was only this amount. Why would you think you can do double or triple? And it was like, okay, well, selling is selling. Like, and so those things still pop up, but I'm able to be more aware of that story and where it came from. So I'm able to kind of disprove those doubts that come up along the way. And I think that's really what it is, becoming aware of what you think of money, your relationship with money, how you view money, and what those doubts are, what those stories are, and kind of going back through them and picking out what's still working, what's not working, and really being honest and working through them. I do money mindset daily. It's an ongoing practice. Every level that you get to, you'll find more doubts. You'll find more things that you never experienced because you just haven't got there yet. So it's an ongoing thing. You find new examples of that. So I gave the analogy once that, we look to people for inspiration. And so sometimes we have to hold on to, if they did it, I can. And not have this competitiveness, but this inspiration. And so look to people who inspire you to do it. And it doesn't have to be so far removed. It could just be someone that you admire that has something. And it's not an envy or jealous thing. It's just that I can do it too. And use that as the example and just be okay with that. And not say like, well, why don't I have it? Do the work to figure out why you don't believe you can have it. What's stopping you from having it? And do that work. But I think we don't want to do the work because it's uncomfortable. It's us admitting that we haven't done something, we don't know how to do something. And we really don't want to do that. That's, we don't want to admit that sometimes we're the problem. But that's the only way that this money thing will work, is you kind of looking internally and saying, these are my blocks. These are my stories. These are my goals. And how can I achieve them? What's stopping me from achieving them? And work on those things.
Another part of your journey in developing a proper money mindset was your ability to bounce back from a financial pitfall. You talked about getting credit with no knowledge and ending up in bankruptcy. So, a lot of people listening to our show are at a place where they're trying to get their feet underneath them. They're trying to get out of debt. And some people get stuck with the inability to start their journey to freedom because they kind of wallow in the mistakes that they made financially in the past, and they get stuck there. Can you talk about what we need to do mentally to get ourselves up off the mat and back in the fight?
Yes. So I think that's a great question. And I think the number one thing that you have to remember is that your mistakes don't define you. You have the ability to bounce back from everything, money, bad relationships, like whatever. You have the ability to decide what you want to do next. And I think that when it comes to certain things, society says that, or maybe it's our culture, I'm not sure, but we have this thought process that, if you are bad with money, you're a bad person. You don't have the expertise. Or if you file for bankruptcy, that's a negative thing. Or if you don't use a budget, it's so restricting. We have a lot of negative connotations to words. And so those words have so much emotion invoked into them that they make us feel a certain way. I hear people all the time saying like budgets are restricting. And it's like, a budget is just a tool to tell your money where to go. That's all it is. But we feel so strongly about it that we don't really take the time to see why we feel so strongly about it. And bankruptcy was another thing. I had a lot of guilt and shame that I should have known better. I have an accounting degree. I'm a CPA. Like, I should have known. But then I kind of thought through it, like, how would I have known? Like, who was the teacher? Who is this imaginary teacher that told me this? And so once I realized what these tools were, it put a lot of things into perspective. Bankruptcy is just a way for you to protect your assets and start over. Nothing more, nothing less. A lot of companies and people use them as tools, strategies. And so I think we have to kind of look at it the same way. And in terms of bouncing back, I think allow yourself that grace to start over if that's what you so choose. But you can't get out of a situation continuing to think about a situation in the same way. And so if you want that new start, decide that you're going to do and have that new start and start to think about things differently. You can't change your thinking. You can't change your outcome with the same thinking that created it. And so I think we tend to like the victim story because the victim story gives us that excuse that I didn't know or I should have known, or that attention. And I think we hold on to it because that's how we identify with it. We identify with those things sometimes. But if you choose to decide to think of how you view yourself or view your finances, you can decide to be something else. And so I think it's just deciding that enough is enough and doing something about it. What results do you get being in that mentality of, I don't have enough, I don't make enough, all of those things that are negative, you get nothing out of it. But imagine all of the opportunities and people who are ready to support you when you're ready to start this new journey. I think also people don't they don't see the value sometimes in paying people to help them. They have this embarrassment of, well, I should have known better. Maybe I don't want to I don't want someone to know how bad it is. But you do yourself no good staying in the bad. And I think that's what a lot of us in the finance industry see. We see the demand, we see the need, but I don't think people see the value in getting our help because of that. I should have known, or I can fix it myself. And then they don't. And then it just gets worse.
Hey, great advice. So I know people want to keep up with you after this episode and get some more wisdom. How can they find you?
Okay, so I am on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Takisha Artis. My website is Takisha's Theory.
We'll be sure to have links to all of that in the show notes of this episode. So as we conclude, Takisha, any final words you want to give to somebody who took everything in that you shared today, but it's like still teetering back and forth with their ability to believe they're worthy of elevating their mentality, their mindset, and their position in life when it comes to their finances?
Yeah, I think that ultimately we have to just decide that we can have it all. I know there's a lot of either or out there, like either you have a good credit score or you have cash in the bank. And I feel like we can have it all. We just have to decide that that's what we choose. We don't have to live in it's either this or either that. Have it all and know that you are worthy of it, and know that it may take some shifts to believe it, to execute it, to whatever, but ultimately you can have it all, period. You just have to decide.
Period. I love it. And that is how we'll wrap it up. We really appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule to come and share your wisdom with us today. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.